Joining us now is the environmentalist and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's father, Stanley Johnson. Welcome, Stanley.
God, I thought you were going to say former father.
Former Prime Minister's father.
Really?
It's a tongue twister.
I'm worried about that.
Stanley, let's start with Joe Biden's age. He's a bit over the hill, isn't he?
I don't agree with that at all. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, he's got the whole world in front of him. If I think about it, looking at Konrad Adenauer, he was 87 when he gave up, and Biden's not going to be 87, even if he serves the whole term.
But you saw that video there. He gets into these blunders. He's tripping upstairs. He's falling off bikes. Surely there's big concerns about the man with his finger on the nuclear button.
We all fall off bikes. I have been falling off bikes all my life. And I think, actually, you think what he's actually done in terms of the experience which he brings to this job is worth going. And in any case, where are the candidates? Where are the other people stepping forward?
I was going to ask you that, because it's a pretty serious question here, isn't there, about the fact that, you know, OK, you say that age isn't a problem. Some people would disagree with you, and they might think that it's not a particularly good look for the President of the United States to be, for example, forgetting the name of the British Prime Minister.
Which one?
But,
there has been a few, yeah.
That's fair enough, but it was a pronunciation issue, not forgetting the name entirely. But I think the question really is for the party, why have they not been able to find a better candidate?
It is a very good question. Now, maybe, you know, Kamala Harris didn't quite get there, and maybe she will get there next time round. I don't think he's going to do another term. He's not allowed to do another term, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a mystery to me why there have not been another good Democratic candidate.
If they had an age limit, for example, they'd be forced to look elsewhere, wouldn't they? I mean, that would be a cut-off point.
Yes, I don't know of a society where there are age limits for...
Well, there are age limits for driving. You have to be a certain age to drive.
Do you think the age limits for being a president? Well, I go back to it. If I think of, as it were, the alternatives to Mr. Biden in terms of him not winning the election, I say to myself, look, stick with what you know here, because I would say, and of course I'm speaking as environmentalist, very kindly Harry introduced me as environmentalist, I look at what Mr. Biden has done quite recently on the environment, and it's pretty good news. The so-called strangely named Inflation Reduction Act is actually all to do with environmental policy, and it's good stuff. So I am batting for Biden here. I don't think these gaffes are particularly important. Someone came in today and said Piers Morgan is not well because he's been poisoned by sushi. I said, well, who's Susie? You know, people do make some mistakes, obviously.
But the problem is, I think what voters will wonder is, you know, he is the leader of the free world. Should his age and should his mental status be a concern to people?
Let's go back. Let's have a little bit of historical perspective here. Gladstone, well over 80 during his last administration. Adenauer, I've already mentioned. Ronald Reagan was getting up to 80. I think he might even have been 80 by the time he stepped down. They're saying that Reagan wasn't a good bet.
Stanley, while we've got you here, there's a question I've been meaning to ask you. Next time I see you, am I going to be calling you Sir Stanley Johnson?
No, I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about. Happily, I've been abroad.
Reportedly, you're on your son's resignation honours list. Would you accept a knighthood?
I have no idea about anything of that nature. And in any case, even if I did have an idea, as I understand it, etiquette is such that never, ever mention
Oh, he must have
Convenient,
given you the
yeah.
nod.
No, let's move on. Back to Biden.
Would you accept it, though?
Back to Biden. I'm biding Biden my time on this one.
I don't think that was a denial. I think that was... I think you left the door open
Well,
there.
we may well find out this week.
No.
But, you know, speaking of Boris Johnson, there've been, I mean, you read the newspapers, there've been some interesting revelations about his response to the Brexit vote today. Anthony Seldon extracts, of course, from his reporting, suggesting that Boris said, crikey, I didn't expect that. We don't have a plan.
Well, now you catch me here because I was a Remainer. Am I allowed to admit here in the Holy of Holies that I was a Remainer? Not only was I a Remainer, I fought to keep us in. We set up an organisation called Environmentalists for Europe, and we fought rather hard. And I was determined that we didn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater as far as all of the environmental policies are concerned. And actually, I've still been doing that, you see, because I was really worried by this something called retained European environmental legislation, which, you know, this is Mr. Rees-Mogg's plan, to scrap all the environmental laws. So, coming back to the substance, your question, yes, of course, it was a strange.
But do you think he said it?
what he was reported to have said by Mr. Selden, he probably Sir Anthony.
Dear
Selden.
Sir, you'll be,
I was
you'll be
worried
joining him.
worried
There's
about
probably
that.
a club.
Sir Anthony was something like, crikey, or something. Crikey, did we do
Well,
it?
he said we don't have a plan. Was that right?
Well, not everybody who wins has a plan. You know, sometimes the first step is to win. You don't necessarily have to have a fully fledged plan. But that said, I think he had to live through the consequences, as we all have.
As we all have. Briefly, before we let you go, I just want to get your response to something, because it's the first time that you've been interviewed on television since this happened, and it's Fiona Bruce.
Since Biden.
Fiona Bruce on Question Time. Let's just have a quick look to remind ourselves of what happened.
He was a wife-beater, Stanley Johnson, on record.
Okay, let me just intervene. I'm not disputing what you're saying, but just so everyone knows what this is referring to. So Stanley Johnson's wife spoke to a journalist, Tom Bauer, and she said that Stanley Johnson had broken her nose and she had ended up in hospital as a result. Stanley Johnson has not commented publicly on that. Friends of his have said it did happen, it was a one-off.
Yes, but it did happen.
Well, look, you just said to me in the break there, I am going to comment publicly. First, your response to what was said
Do you know
there.
something? That is such total garbage. I mean, total garbage as far as I'm concerned. You know, if I have a chance for a comment public, I'm doing it. It's total garbage. I have my conscience is 100% clear, and honestly, I'm not going to name. So I hope I never have to meet the people involved. But I do not believe that anybody who knows me, anybody who knows the 40 years I have passed as a real friend with my former wife since we got divorced, will know that it is total.
So was what happened to Fiona Bruce unfair? Because she lost her position with the charity.
Fiona Bruce, I think, did the right thing. Now, had she been fully briefed, she would have read the statement which was made by my agent, which said, look, actually, poor Stanley Johnson's wife, Charlotte, suffered from obsessional compulsive disorder, and yes, the only time that happened was as a result of a domestic. I mean, it was absurd, and I have felt very strongly about it.
Well, thank you so much for your response, Stanley Johnson. Thank you for joining us.